Good morning, folks. I guess it depends on where you're living. Good day, folks. My name's Laurie Rutherford. I'm the president of the Irish Wolfhound Club of Canada. We welcome you to our first educational seminar hosted by the IWCC. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you one of the co-founders of the Irish Wolfhound Data Base, who has graciously offered his time to present his talk about the state of the breed and to provide useful tips on how to use the database to its full potential, whether you're a breeder, puppy buyer, or a breed organization. Before we start, I'd like to just mention a few housekeeping rules. Please mute your mics, and if you have questions, we'll take them at the last hour. If you write them in the chat box, we'll just work through them in the second hour. So this presentation is being recorded and will be shared on the Irish Wolfhound Club Facebook page for those who could not attend today. The webinar is free for all folks attending, and if you find the database in the webinar useful, a donation to assist the IW database to continually expand would be very welcome. Any donation, big or small, would be greatly appreciated, and payment can be made to their PayPal account at info@iwdb.org. With that, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Per Arne Flatberg. It's my great pleasure to introduce Per. We met in May of this year at the BC Specialty, and he graciously offered to present his database talk to a larger group. So Per hails from the scenic city of Bergen on Norway's west coast, where he lives with his partner Anne Birgitte Larsen and their Irish Wolfhound Lavrans. Though he grew up with a golden retriever and a mother who loved dogs, it wasn't until 2010 that he and Anne Birgitte welcomed their first wolfhound, and they marked the beginning of this journey with the breed. Since then, Per Arne has become deeply involved in the breed's welfare and future. He has served the Irish Wolfhound Club of Norway in various leadership roles, including secretary, chairman, and chair of the health committee. It was in this health-focused role that he was asked to develop a breed-specific breeding strategy, something the Norwegian Kennel Club required of all breed clubs in 2013. It was during this project that he realized just how difficult it was to gather reliable pedigree data, especially on imported dogs. For someone relatively new to the breed, tracing lineages and understanding the ancestry of foreign bloodlines proved especially challenging. But where some might have stopped, Per Arne saw an opportunity. He connected with fellow enthusiasts and breeders across Europe, Pernille Malmberg in Denmark, Edita Beresova in the Czech Republic, Maura Lyons in Scotland, and Jean Timmins in England, all of whom were facing the same problem. Combining their knowledge and perspectives, they launched an ambitious project to build a comprehensive and global Irish Wolfhound pedigree database. Thanks to his background in computers and database programming, Per Arne took on the task of creating the software. After 18 months of dedicated work, the Irish Wolfhound database officially launched in March 2016. Today, it serves as a critical resource for breeders, clubs, and fanciers around the world. This afternoon, Per will share insights into what the database can do, how it's evolved, and what it tells us about the Irish Wolfhound population from a global perspective. So please join me in welcoming Per Arne Flatberg. Take it away, Per.
Thank you, Laurie. So good to see you all. I'm thrilled to be asked to hold this presentation for you. It was really a joy for me to come to Vancouver on mission and be at the BC Specialty in May and talking to some of you there. It was a pleasure, and we had a community there where we were able to exchange ideas and thoughts in a way that's unfortunately not as easy on a digital media or digital platform as this, but hopefully it will be enjoyable for all of us anyway. I just wanted to mention that although we started the database with Jean and Maura and Pernilla and Edith and me, there's so many more people to thank for the place we are today. The Irish Wolfhound Club of America has dedicated tremendous resources to help us trace all the American data. I think Nina Gotch is with us, and she has been especially helpful. And so many people in Canada has been helpful as well. So big thank you to all of you. I'll just share part of my screen now. Okay, so this is, I like to start my presentations with this photo. It's my previous dog Lyder in front of a curious Viking village in Western Norway. And it brings the ties back to the breed's history. In the Norse sagas, there's two prominent Irish wolfhounds, one who belonged to a guy called Gunnar, who lived on Iceland, the dog called Samr, and another one called Vige, who was owned by Olav Tryggvason, one of the big Norwegian kings. And I think it's fascinating to be part of that history, and I think we all feel like the history of the Irish Wolfhound is, well, it's one of the great things about the breed. What I wanted to talk to you about today is, well, 5 things. I first wanted to give a very short introduction to the database itself, then a very brief history of Irish Wolfhounds. I'll talk a bit of the state of the breed in Canada, and then a bit about what's the difference between Canada and the world. And then we'll probably have a small break, and we'll have a deep dive into the database afterwards. And if you can't understand me, please just write a question in the chat or raise your hand or whatever, and I will try to explain. English isn't my first language, and I probably have some mispronunciations and things like that, so I'm not offended. If you do want to ask questions, please just jot them down in the chat while I'm presenting, and we'll get to them eventually. It's so easy when you have all this material to forget what you really wanted to ask afterwards. So best to just write it in, and we'll get to it. Okay, the database. One of the important things for us is that it's free and open for all. It is, unlike other pedigree databases, it's geared towards both puppy buyers and breeders and breed bodies, and even people who aren't necessarily into the Irish Wolfhound or in the community might find it interesting. So anybody who have an interest in Irish Wolfhounds or in Irish Wolfhound history are free to open it and use it as they like. Our main goal is to have pedigree data on all registered Irish Wolfhounds that ever lived worldwide. It's probably unattainable, and it's getting a bit harder because a lot of countries are shutting down the publication of their stud books and being less transparent about what's going on, unfortunately. So it gets increasingly hard to know what's being bred in certain countries. It is important for us to be global. We will see the status in Canada later on, but in Norway, about 2/3 of all males used in stud are imported. So for us, it's really important to have that international perspective, because otherwise we have a very limited view of the breed. At the moment, we have probably around 98% of all Irish Wolfhounds that ever lived. There's around 179,000 and some. And complete pedigree data back to the breed founders on about 96% of them. So very few orphans these days, and it's getting better by the day. And then we have way more than just pedigree data, and there's tools for puppy buyers, for breeders, for breed bodies, and scientists all alike. Just this week, we went into a contract with some students in Hungary who wanted to study fertility in the Irish Wolfhound and to use the database to understand more about the breed lines, which they are able to now. So it's hopefully useful for them as well. Like many other studies, especially the Irish Wolfhound Foundation have done quite a few studies, which is based on data from the Irish Wolfhound database, and that's really nice to know. It's bringing the breed forward. So in addition to just the pedigrees, there's health screening results, there's images, there's longevity information. We've just a few months ago added critiques to the database from various shows, and we have a very comprehensive tool set to search and find information and put information together. We'll get into that in the second part of this webinar. So I'm probably talking to people who have been in the breed for far longer than myself now, but I just wanted to briefly touch upon the breed history. As most of you probably know, it's a very ancient breed. There's descriptions going back to pre-Christian times, and it's a vital breed for the Irish mythology and the Irish history. But it also goes across the Irish Sea into Rome, into Nordic mythology and Nordic history, into German history, etc., etc. The breed was almost extinct in the mid-19th century, with less than 40 individual dogs in existence, which was really a really critical point for the breed history. And then Captain Graham and his partners resurrected the breed to a standard description, which is 150 years old, almost. So, and that was the basis for the modern Irish Wolfhound. And today there's around 20,000 registered Irish Wolfhounds worldwide. And we had several dramatic population changes in history, which have had quite an impact on the breed. I'll just go through the most important ones in a little while. I'd like to talk about the resurrection of the breed, which I believe was an outcross project, which started around 1862 and lasted to 1923. In that period, we had approximately 80 litters that were outcrossed to other breeds than Irish Wolfhounds. The last known outcross, which is registered, was done in 1942 in the UK, and those lines are now extinct. We do believe there's been numerous outcrosses that aren't necessarily registered, and thus it's very hard to prove that. But there's been quite a few rumors around Europe and probably in the US and Canada as well about matings with other breeds and registration as an Irish Wolfhound litter. We have to trust the paperwork and what's registered, and can't really rely on rumors. So that's why we handle those as they are registered, even though some litters are obviously not correct. In population genetics, we often talk about the founder population. In the Irish Wolfhound, that consists of 68 individual dogs, and these are all in all Irish Wolfhound pedigrees today, and they are first-generation Wolfhounds, or dogs that we don't have parental information on. So the last founder was imported to the UK in the 1930s by the Gardner sisters, and it's likely that we know the pedigree, but it's unknown, and it's registered as parents and date of birth unknown. So it is the founder when it comes to our database. We had some dramatic population changes, as I mentioned. Up until 1920, there was a worldwide population of between 200 and 350 dogs. And then it went upwards until the mid-30s and maybe late 30s. And we can see that because until 1920, most, if not all, Irish Wolfhounds were registered in the UK and in the USA. Later in the 20s and especially in the 30s, we saw the first registrations across Europe and in other countries as well. So that was like a big peak of the population. And then after World War II, it was reduced to around 600 hounds worldwide, which had a steady increase up to about 1,000 by 1960. And then in 1963, or 61, sorry, John F. Kennedy got gifted an Irish Wolfhound from a pastor in Ireland, and the breed became much more popular because of that and probably other things as well. So by 1970 we had 4,000 hounds, and by 1980 we had 17,000, and the breed interest peaked in 1997 with 26,000 hounds worldwide. I'm beginning to think that we are at the beginning of another dramatic population change. We have seen a 25% drop in the number of litters since the pandemic, which is a very dramatic decrease, and it indicates that we are on a way into a recession for the Irish Wolfhound. And what any population geneticist will tell you is that dramatic population changes will lead to more genetic bottlenecks. It will lead to more inbreeding, and it will lead to a less robust breed. That goes both for rapid increases in population and rapid decreases, which I believe we are on our way into now. So that's the world. If we look at Canada alone, this graph shows the development of the population size in Canada over the last 3 generations, really, the last 12 years, from 2011 through 2023. I would like to have updated that to 2024, but the Canadian Kennel Club hasn't published their stud book yet, and for 2024, and when they do, we will have updated data. But as you can see, 14 years ago, there was less than 1,100 wolfhounds in Canada, and in 2018, we had around 1,620. So that's a 50% increase in just 7 years. And then we've had a decrease over the last few years, and we now have, well, 2 years ago, had around 1,350 Irish Wolfhounds in Canada. I believe probably that has gone down further in the last 2 years, but we'll see when we get to stud book. If we look at litters born, that's the main cause of the fall. This thick yellow graph line shows the number of litters born every year from 20 in 2011 to a peak of 40 in 2017. So that's double the number of litters. Then we're down to a more normal 28 in 2023. So we'll see where that leads us. Unfortunately, I didn't get the percentages here, but I'll try to explain this. When we look at breeding, and this is still for the last 12 years in Canada. We look at where did the breeding material come from, the sires on the left and the dams on the right. So we'll see on the sire side, about 58% of all the sires used in Canadian breeding were Canadian. About 20% were, or 22% were American from the US, and a bit more, about 26% were from other countries in the world, mainly from Europe. Whereas in the dams of the litters, we have much more Canadian bred dams, about 80%, and then 10% from the US and 10% imported from the rest of the world. So why is this important? It's important because you have quite a small population. If you only relied on Canadian stud dogs and Canadian dams, you would soon get into problems because they are from a very small population. And as we'll see a bit later on, most of that small population is also from commercial breeders whose breeding is normally not used in the mainline Irish Wolfhound breeding. I'd also like to show you this. This is a list of the most prominent sires in the last 12 years in Canada. And I won't recite the names of them, but all these sires have had 6 or more litters in that period. The American import, the US import that had the most litters had 12, and the German import that had the second most also had 12. So we have a well, when you have so few litters in Canada, it's about on average maybe 100 litters in a generation. A generation is 4 years. If one dog is the sire of 12 of those 100 litters, it will have sired 12% of the population in that generation. And if there's 2 who have had 12 litters, they would have sired almost 1 in 4 litters between them. And that becomes a problem because it's really hard to breed away from them later on. And you'll see that in 3, 4, 5 generations back, you will see the same ancestors being there. And all this information is readily available for you in the database. I'll show you after the break how you find that information. Also plotted this one. This is about lifespan. One of the most important projects we do with the Irish Wolfhound Data Base is that we collect lifespan information. We currently have lifespan of more than 13,000 hounds worldwide. And that's important because it says something about the potential for lifespan in their offspring. We know that lifespan in itself is a very heritable condition. If your parents live long, healthy lives, it's more probable that you will do it as well than if they are generally ill or die early. And the same goes for dogs. And we have studies that have checked that and calculated the heritability of longevity itself. So it's really important. This yellow line shows the lifespan of dogs that died in a specific year in Canada. And you can see it's very much up and down from 8.5 years on average down to 6.4 years on average. And the reason for that is that we don't really have enough data. If you look at these numbers above and below the orange line, it says N is 5, which means that we have a sample size of 5 dogs, which makes the basis for this. Over here is 24, this year is 30, this year is 24, etc., etc. Canada is one of the countries where we have the least lifespan information compared to the population size. And it's really, really easy to that information into the database, and we encourage you to do that. The blue line shows the development of lifespan worldwide, where we have much more data, and we can see it's not going very fast, but the trend is certainly good. From around 7.1 years in 2011 to 7.48 years or something in 2023. So it's increasing. And adding to that, before we started the Irish Wolfhound database, before 2016, data recorded had a massive veteran bias, where the information we have is mainly from people publishing in magazines. So my dog lived to the fine age of 9 years or 10 years or whatever, and very few published data saying, oh, my poor puppy died at the age of 2 of osteosarcoma or whatever. Since we launched the database and started collecting this information, we have gathered so much more information from puppy buyers, especially, who are publishing information about their dogs and really wanted to tell their story, which is very useful for the breed itself. This is the causes of this. I would like to have percentages here as well. They disappeared when I exported this one. But as you can see, in Canada, cancer, this big blue block here, is the main cause of this. It is the same as it is worldwide. The green one here is accident, injuries, poison, surgery complications, etc. That's normally not the second biggest cause of this worldwide, because old age and weak rear is. And then we have heart disease, which is normally number 2 or 3. Oh, sorry, number 3 or 4. And then we have pneumonia and bloat or torsion up here. I don't find that so interesting in itself. It's more interesting to look at what's been happening over the last few years. And this is a worldwide graph of what's been happening. And I think there's 3 important trends here. The first one is this gray line here. In the 1970s and 80s, about 3 to 4% of the dogs died from respiratory disease of any kind. In the period 2010 to 24, we have more than 12% who have died from that. Pneumonia has become a major killer in our breed, and it's happened fast. The second thing I'd like to point out is the red line, which is bloat, torsion, whatever you like to call it, which was the number 3 cause of death in the 70s and 80s, but it's now down to number 5, and it has decreased rapidly in that period. And it's quite rare these days to hear, especially often, that wolfhounds die from bloat, which is a good thing. And the third thing I'd like to point out is the green one, heart disease. It used to be that we all knew dogs that had died from DCM or other forms of heart disease. It's becoming much rarer now. I believe it's due to both the screening protocols we have across the world, but also to bad medication. Vetmedine and other drugs are doing wonders for our dogs there. As for cancer, the big blue one, I'm not really too concerned about that one. We have seen cancer as a major cause of death always. What we see now is that, more dogs die from cancer. I believe it's because they all have to die from something. And cancer is a major killer in the senior age, when we all get old. There's no evidence suggesting that we have more early onset cancer than we used to. It's about the same distribution. The dogs die from cancer at about the same rate, or the young dogs that die from cancer die at about the same rate as they used to, and the old dogs as well. So it's quite balanced. So I believe cancer is actually combined with old age, weak, rare, the old age deaths of Irish Wolfhounds. We can always discuss that later on. Then another interesting part is inbreeding. We don't need transparency for that. We just need pedigree data. And what we have seen in the last 20, 30 years across the world is that inbreeding levels have gone massively down. These numbers are calculated on 10 generations. And back in 1990, that used to be, the average used to be over 20% inbreeding, coefficient of inbreeding on 10 generations worldwide. Now it's down to just over 5. And that's a massive change. And I think it happened because the kennel clubs, breed clubs, animal rights activists all talked about inbreeding, and we all learned about inbreeding and the dangers they posed. In addition, we got access to breeding material from outside our own neighborhood, which expanded our possibilities to breed with a big variation. But what we'll see in Canada is that the inbreedings level have remained steadily quite much higher than what's happening in the breed in the rest of the world. I don't know why. Might be due to a lot of commercial breeders. It might be due to breeders who are believing in inbreeding or using inbreeding as a tool for keeping the breed true or keeping the type. I don't know. We'll see. I keep talking about the commercial breeders, and in the last 12 years through 2023, there were 414 litters born in Canada from 99 distinct breeders. 14 of them had more than 9 litters, and these 14 had 2/3 of all the litters in that period. And you'll see, if you're familiar with Canadian breeders, you will see a few well-known and very well-regarded breeders here, but you will also see some of the more commercial breeders in Canada on this list. So you can't really just say that, okay, because Jocelyn, who I believe is in here, breeds quite a bit, that she's a commercial breeder. She's not. There's other marks of that. Whereas Norhunter, I would call a commercial breeder, breeds for commercial reasons and not much else. We can always discuss that later on as well. Okay. So does it really matter? I'd like to take you on a tour with back in history and to Norway and to Canada. This is Lyder again, the dog you saw earlier on. And we started on a project where we wanted to explore, okay, how different are wolfhounds from, say, Canada and the UK, Australia, the US, and Norway. And because we all talked about our lines when I got into the breed. People in Norway still talked about the Danish type, the wolf or the ice bear type of wolfhound they had there, etc., etc. So we wanted to look at, okay, how similar or dissimilar are they really? There's been quite a bit of studies on that with DNA, which are fascinating, but now we're just using the database. So First, I'd like to take you back to the resurrection. We used, or Captain Graham and his compatriots used 6 breeds in that period. They used Great Danes, Borzois, Mastiffs, 1 Tibetan Hound, and quite a lot of Scottish Deerhounds, and quite a lot of what they then called Irish Wolfhounds. So all our dogs today are basically have all these breeds in their bloodlines. And when we start to calculate this, it's important that we know what contribution each generation give us. So genetically, 50% of my genetic material comes from my father and 50% from my mother. And similarly, 25% come from each of my grandparents, 12.5% from each of my great-grandparents, and so on. And these numbers become very, very small when we get to the number of generations we do in the database. But then again, we double up quite a lot of times, and makes the numbers really large again. But you have to understand that when we talk about contribution, that's the genetic contribution we talk about. In the database, we can trace our sire and dam lines way back. So this is Lyder's sire line on the right and dam line on the left, with August Amber Marksbay, which is his mother, Wolfos Umbriella, which is his maternal grandmother, Rapsteen Blue, etc., etc. And looking at these, we have Norwegian, Danish, Swedish, Irish, German dog, some more Irish, some British, no Canadian material, no American. And on the sire side, his sire was Irish, and lots of Irish dogs and some British ones, but still nothing until we get back to 18 generations back, where we have Sanctuary Rory of Gihon, which was in his pedigree, of course, like it is in everybody's. So we'll see it's very much a product of Norwegian, Danish, and Irish breeding. In the database, we have something called a pedigree map, and we'll go into detail about that later on. We'll see there's 3 dogs that are really, really important in Lyder's pedigree. I mentioned this one, Sanctuary Rory of Gihon. He was born in 1951. He's the 7th most influential dog, with 4.8% influence in Lyder's pedigree. And if you remember back to this one, but 5% is his grandparents. So 24.8% means that he's almost as influential as his grandparents, and he is 18 generations back in Lyder's pedigree. And then we have Clonboy of Oberon. He was born in 1939 and a survivor of World War II. He was used on almost all the bitches in the UK and Ireland after the World War, because there were almost nobody left. His influence is more than 20%, almost as high as any of his 4 grandparents. And then in the far bottom right here, there's a typo there. Solheimstad Conqueror wasn't born in 1939, but in 1919. He was blind, owned by Mrs. Nagel. He is appearing more than 5 million times in Lyder's pedigree. And he has an influence of 17.4%, and is the 10th most influential dog in that pedigree. He contributes more to Lyder's genetic makeup than any of his 8 great-grandparents. It's astonishing how these things happen. It does. Is that typical for Lyder? No, it's not. If you look at this one, Berry Briar Knockani Promise from the Past, I think is her name. They have both the same ancestors that appear many times. I'll just drop off of the presentation now and show you a window here instead. Oops, sorry. Here. So this is Lyder's ancestors, with the first one, number 1 and 2 being his parents. If you look down here at number 7, oops, you will see their sanctuary Rory O'Kehoe, right? His influence is 24.88%. He appears 43,092 times in his pedigree. So that means even though he's far away, he's duplicated so many times that his influence becomes big. And then we have Clone Boy as number 8. And then on the 10th place, 5.3 million times in his pedigree is Solemnstead Concara. Right? So you'll see that these dogs are here. And if you look at Promise instead, I have her here as well. It's really hard to remember all these numbers, but I'll try to help you. Here's Rory at number 3, 30.61% influence. Oops, sorry, I forgot to share. And I'll share something else. I'm sorry. There we are. So this is Promise. Still, Rory is on the number 3 of the most influential ancestors. He's there more times and has a higher influence. And if we go down here, we'll see as number 10, this Clone Boy of Oberon, with a higher influence than on Lyder's pedigree. He's lowered down because we have this one here, Cargill and Berwick Imago, which is line bred to create Promise. And also Clarice Travis McGee which appears on both sides of the pedigree as great-grandparents. And then we have Solemnstead Concara down here as number 14. So if you start looking into these ancestors and look at the most influential ones, you will see the same 15, 20 dogs in almost all pedigrees in mainstream Irish Wolfhounds across the world. And Promise has a very Canadian US pedigree, whereas Lyder has a Scandinavian Irish pedigree, but these are all interconnected. The one exception to this is if you look at some of the more commercial breeders who have bred with their own stock and from other commercial breeders over the last, say, 10 or 12 generations, they will have much lower influence of these important dogs than we do in the mainstream Irish Wolfhounds. But you can certainly look at any of your dogs, and I'll bet you that you will find Sanctuary Rory O'Kehoe, Clone Boy of Oberon, and Solemnstead Concara, at least in the top 20 of the most influential dogs in your dog's pedigree. I'm sure of it. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk about as a background. I thought we'd take a 10-minute break or something now, and we'll get back to doing the database in practice after that. Is that okay? Yeah, some
Yes,
nodding going on.
Good.
We'll meet again at let's meet in 13 minutes when it's on the clock. Okay.
Top of the hour.
Yeah, top of the hour.
Okay,
Excellent.
thank you.
I'll have a break.